Our next teacher is going to be Professor Sam Shuman. Professor Shuman is an assistant professor in the Department of Religious Studies at the University of Virginia. They are a cultural anthropologist and scholar of Jewish studies. Professor Shuman researches Hasidic Judaism within a global context to rethink questions in political theology about race and religion, global capitalism, gender and sexuality, sovereignty, and empire. Professor Shuman earned their PhD and MA in sociocultural anthropology with a graduate certificate in Judaic studies from the University of Michigan. They are currently working on a book exploring the various forms of saintly mediation performed by Reb Shayele, a Hasidic miracle worker, who we will learn more about now. So please help me welcome Professor Shuman.
Thank you so much to Isaac. So mine is a little bit less interactive and a little bit less text study oriented. And actually, as I'll explain, it actually is quite fitting that it's not text study oriented, because Shayele actually really is celebrated for producing no Torah, which is I'll explain why that is of such interest and appeal. So first, I'm really humbled by the invitation to speak with you today, and I really want to open some time at the end for Q&A to really get your feedback. I'm really honored to be speaking in between Rabbis Abigail Halpern and Amelia Wolf. I hope I'm pronouncing their names correctly. And I've been a long fan and #ally, I guess you could say, of the halachic left. I don't know if I don't really identify as a halachic Jew, but very much have my sympathies with halachic Jews and Judaism. And so I also want to thank the organizers for all of the labor in making this event possible. So I'll begin with a disclaimer. I'm an anthropologist, as was mentioned by Isaac, and so I'm not used to really making normative ethical claims of what should be done. And when I do, I don't really do them explicitly. I smuggle them into my arguments, like a lot of good anthropologists. And today, I guess, I'm not simply here to kind of diagnose different impasses we face on the left, but here to offer a few insights on how we might confront them. I hesitate to say that I offer remedies, but I think maybe lessons will be the goal, and that I think is a lofty one, maybe. My method for today's talk is somewhat odd, but there's a rich anthropological tradition of doing what I'm about to do, which is I want us to think collectively with contemporary Hasidic life as a way to think through the contradictions of our current political moment. So 2 caveats on this point. Caveat 1 is I'm making the assumption that you, the audience, is non-Hasidic. Caveat 2 I apologize. And I apologize too, Asu, if you're Chabad, because again, I would not put it in the category of Hasidic. They're Hasidic, they're Hasidim, and they're people who are Hasidish, and people are Hasidic, and Chabad is its own sociological phenomenon. I also don't actually think there's a profound ontological chasm that divides Hasidic and non-Hasidic life, or not in the ways we might assume. I think that Hasidic life is sometimes symbolically overburdened. Hasidim come to represent the Freudian return of the repressed in the Ashkenazi Jewish imagination, and that's certainly not a new insight. The exoticized other, what Trio would have called kind of sometimes the savage slot, and I very much put that in scare quotes. And I don't think any of this is particularly revelatory, what I'm saying. It's not a chiddush. And it strikes me as unproductive to kind of rehearse this critique. I'm more interested in what we do with this knowledge. That is, how can we strategically universalize what are often treated as particular, exceptional, and often pathological features of Hasidic life to make larger claims, in fact, about our own pathologies and contradictions on the left. And so this is kind of a 2-step operation, which is the kind of classic anthropological move, kind of drawn upon from kind of Russian formalists and surrealists, which is to kind of defamiliarize the familiar and familiarize the strange. So let me give you an example of what I mean in more concrete terms, because before I really delve into the topic today, which is about this Hasidic populist messianic revival movement that I've been tracking. So one that speaks directly to this conversation about reckoning with Jewish power. I want us to consider the Jewish informer or the informant, the moiser, and the structure of Mesira, of informing on another Jew to historically non-Jewish authorities. So Hasidim and ultra-Orthodox Jews, more broadly, take Mesira very seriously. They use it as a mechanism of control to name and shame, ostracize, and punish those who snitch, or who might threaten to snitch, those who take their cases to secular courts, who report the crimes to the police rather than handling matters internally. But simply because Haredim, ultra-Orthodox Jews, regularly and explicitly use this term, doesn't mean it's any less operative, or I would say even destructive, in contemporary non-Haredi Jewish life. Let's not fall prey to the illusion that it's only Haredim who close ranks, act in tribalistic fashion, and punish tailcoats. Indeed, I think we need to reckon with the psychosocial trauma of Mesira. Our opponents, I think, accuse us often of being Meisrim, of being informers, if not Latter-day apostates who have functionally converted to Christianity, who tell tall tales to non-Jewish authorities. Our haters claim that we seek to position ourselves as good Jews who will sell them out, bad Jews, to our feudal overlords for social and political capital, for the illusion of acceptance and security in non-Jewish society. And again, I think you can look to the writings of Ruth Weiss to see this, where this is made actually quite explicitly. And this is a kind of cynical reason, which is a term I'm going to be returning to later, that I think is kind of plagued by magical thinking. Our haters believe it's our condemnation of Israel's policies, not the actions of the state, that endangers the security of global Jewry. But it is ultimately the act of us serving as informers, of us committing Mesira b'farhesia, that is, doing this kind of informing in the public domain for all to witness, that is the real crime against humanity that is being committed. We've aired out our dirty laundry for the non-Jews to see. And this contains an important admission, which is, I think, that in fact, people very well know what is occurring, lest I be accused of charging them with false consciousness. There is no limit to the atrocities that Israel can commit, because the greater atrocity will always be the act of us, other Jews, telling it to the non-Jewish world. They know and operate as if we don't always already live in a globally mediatized world in which we can all witness the obliteration of Palestinian life in Gaza and the West Bank. Okay. I'm now going to pivot in a somewhat different direction, which is, but I will return later to the relevance of this kind of cynical reason, a term coined by the German philosopher Peter Sloterdijk and later developed further by Slovenian philosopher Slavoj Žižek into what he playfully calls enlightened false consciousness, because I think this is actually very operative in Reb Shayele's movement. And I think it's, again, one of the driving features of this global populist messianic Hasidic revival movement that I'll be chatting about today. The cynical reason that animates the messianic populism of this movement bears striking parallels to the cynical reason I think that often plagues our movements. And when I evoke us here, I mean the left more broadly, not just the Jewish left exclusively. And I'll hold off on offering what lessons I think this Hasidic populist movement offers us until much later in the talk. So I'm going to really dive into this movement that I've been tracking. So let us begin. Lomar Unheiden, as we say in Yiddish. This revival movement centers on Reb Shayele, Rabbi Yeshaya Steiner, a Hasidic miracle worker who lived in the northeastern wine country of Hungary from 1851 to 1925. For some of you in the audience, you might know Reb Shayele, who I'll refer to thereafter in the talk as just as Shayele. And by the way, it's an immunitive, it's a double diminutive. So Yeshaya is his name. The diminutive of it, right, is Shaya, and then the immunitive, which is only a term I've ever seen used by Yiddish linguists, it's a double diminutive, which is even more, cutesy and warm, because rebbes are like that. You got to have that kroivschaft, that closeness. Is Shayele, right? He's tiny, and I actually think this is quite important to understand. And he's often referred to as sometimes, I would say a little bit cheekily, as the mouse rebbe or the rat rabbi. All right. Next slide, please. That's because Reb Shayele's icon is often hung in Haredi homes and businesses to protect against the infestation of rodents. And I'll return to this association with rodents, but for now I'll note that he has in the past decade witnessed a marked kind of surge in popularity. And I've spent most of my waking hours over the past 5 years trying to understand why. It's this puzzle more than anything else that animates my work. So I think there are some obvious reasons why. Hagiographies of Shayele, that is, writings of his life as a saint, and I use that term very intentionally, set the stage for his broad appeal. He was born in 1851 to Hensha Miriam and Moshe Steiner in the town of Zbarov near the Hungarian-Galician border. His father died only 3 years later, saddling his mother with the sole responsibility of raising their 7 children. Now that he was orphaned, his mother worried about his fate. After he became a bar mitzvah, she sent him to the Liska Rav, Reb Shayele in Liska. And the Liska Rav would occupy the role of basically a father to Reb Shayele and supplying him the education necessary for his ethical cultivation. Now, Shayele's status as an orphan, I think, is significant. In the system of sacral kin/kingship, Shayele is of the people. He's claimed by them as their own. He does not descend from a Hasidic dynasty, nor does he boast any kind of pedigree, yichus. He's an outsider, or perceived as an outsider, to a system of elites. He's a maverick, if you will, a stranger king, as he's imagined to be. He became a rebbe because of the miracles he performed, defying the very laws of nature. But he's also imitable. So we might assume that his miracles make him singular and exceptional to such a degree that any desire to imitate him would prove futile. How can one, after all, imitate the inimitable? And I think this is always an interesting paradox of saintly exemplarity, right? Is how do you negotiate that stira? But everyday Hasidim can model themselves after him. Saints function as exemplars, as models of and for, to quote the late Clifford Geertz, particular attributes. And he's the patron saint of hospitality, one who performs miracles of abundant generosity for everyday Hasidim. He's the everyday person's rebbe. To understand Shayele's populist appeal today requires us to return to one of the tales that recounts a miracle he performed in his own lifetime. It's a mice misa, if you will, or a baba misa. Next slide, please. I'm sorry, I'm going to be making a lot of puns because this is apparently also an attribute of ADHD, which is undiagnosed, but yeah. There once lived a holy miracle worker named Reb Shayele who lived in the wine country of Hungary in a town called Kerestir, which is the Yiddish name for it, beside Tokaj. So if you've ever heard of the famous Tokaj wine region, that's where it is. Because Hasidic leaders hold court each Saturday night at the conclusion of the Sabbath, Shayele would hold court and host a grand meal to feed any guest who visited him. He was legendary for his hospitality, particularly during Malava Malka, the meal eaten after Shabbos. This threshold between the end of the Sabbath and the beginning of the week, right, is known to be an auspicious time in which miracles of abundance are performed for health and wealth and easy labor during childbirth, among other things. Shayele would perform any number of miracles, pulling out challah rolls, bilkalech, from a bottomless sack. One Saturday night, a Jewish man visited Reb Shayele. The man's livelihood had all been ruined by mice. They had eaten the provisions in his grain warehouse. "Is your town's pastor kind or harsh?" Reb Shayele asked the man. "Very harsh," the man replied. So Reb Shayele told the man to return to his warehouse and instruct the mice to seek vengeance on the local pastor. The mice complied with these orders immediately. Hundreds of them scurried to the pastor's estate. The man's provisions were saved, and the local priest was tormented by the mice instead. In other accounts, the pastor was a local state official or nobleman. And ever since this time, Hasidic Jews, among others, have hung icons of Reb Shayele in their homes and businesses to ward off mice. Yet Shayele has become so intimately associated with these small, gnawing rodents that other elements of these tales have become overshadowed in the process. His association with mice has rendered him a rather amusing oddity. Next slide, please. I would argue, and I'm developing this right now for an article in a book chapter, that Shayele is kind of the Hasidic Hermes, the divine patron of tricksters. He inhabits the thresholds. Sometimes he's located at a doorpost, other times at border crossings, as we shall later see. But here in this instance, his meal of hospitality, Malev Malka, the queer time space of the threshold between the sacred and the profane, the Sabbath and the week. It's in this threshold in which excess and abundance can be channeled, drawn down into the world. Health and wealth, livelihood and prosperity. And again, this is part of a larger thing we can call the social reproduction of Hasidic life. Shayele, like Hermes, inhabits other sorts of thresholds. He plays and deceives with the interpretive gaps of language. Hermes, after all, is a hermeneut, and there's been a lot of writing on this. And Shayele plays with words, with similarly sounding words in Hebrew and Aramaic. Specifically, there's a famous quotation for mysteries and starvation. Next slide. So other rebbes are engaged in Rosen de Rosen, the deepest mysteries, while I am engaged in the Saiva de Lola Rosen, the for satiation and not starvation, making sure that Yidden Jews eat their fill. So again, he plays on these words to make this larger, kind of populist claim that, yeah, the other rebbes are really into all of these esoteric teachings of the Torah to the world, about the Godhead. And in fact, I just give Jews what they need, which is everyday miracles so they can survive. He offers no esoteric teachings of Torah to the world, no works, no artifacts in the kind of Arendtian sense. He leaves no Sfarim, holy books, in his name. And that is precisely his appeal. He's in fact frequently referred to as the Rebbe of Gashmias, of the concrete, sensuous material, of what the body needs to sustain itself. And I'm going to return to this later. But to return to the story, in this liminal space of reversals, the poison becomes the cure. The mice transform from the problem into the solution. The man's livelihood is saved, and the anti-Semitic pastor is terrorized instead. Next slide, please. The mice are a device, so to speak. The narrative reveals a subaltern Jewish imaginary of protection and fantasy of justice, a swarm of small creatures wreak havoc against towering enemies. Perhaps an obvious point should be noted. It's not the warehouse owner who takes charge and confronts power. To do so would be unthinkable, even in this miraculous tale of exceptionality which suspends the natural order of things. It's inconceivable for a Jew to confront a non-Jewish agent of power. The mice must do it instead. And I want us to keep this in mind as we progress, because they actually, so to speak, fall out in his enactment today. Shayele is a trickster, so don't let his cute association with mice disarm you. He protects against all forms of infestation, of invasion from unwelcome intruders. He protects his followers from all sorts of pests. As a hermeneutic, Shayele plays with all sorts of linguistic charms to outwit his enemies, to charm secular sovereigns into acquiescence. Populists distinguish between friends and enemies, or the leaders do. And to riff loosely on Derrida, hospitality ratifies some strangers as welcome guests, others as unwelcome enemies. And to be a good host, as anthropologist Andrew Shryak at Michigan, where I studied, notes of hospitality among Balga Bedouin in Jordan, quote, hospitality, karam, in local dialect, is not simply a matter of offering tea, cigarettes, and pleasant conversation to guests. It is also a test of sovereignty. The man, and it is a masculine figure, who is karim, hospitable, generous, noble, is able to feed others, project an honorable and enviable reputation, and protect guests from harm. Okay, next slide, please. So I began this project in January 2021 much by accident. I was en route to the lunch of the home of my friend Tuli Padva, a Hasidic chef in Antwerp, born in London, who subsequently became the star of a TV series in Belgium and now a minor celebrity of sorts. And if you know the name Padva, he's kind of like Bel's Hasidic royalty. And he's kind of a little bit of a maverick in his own regard. I passed by Jakobstraat, the street where I once lived, while conducting research about Antwerp's Hasidic community and the crisis of its diamond workers, which was the subject of my dissertation, which I won't be talking about today. Suddenly, I happened upon a familiar face, Reb Shayele. What was Shayele's face doing on several Hasidic synagogues in Antwerp, alongside social distancing guidelines and COVID-19 protocols. Shayele was always a domestic figure for me. I had seen his icon in local stores and businesses, even in sukkahs, but never out in the open exposed to the world. I arrived at Tuli's apartment with a theory. It's to protect against the plague, right? Against the Megefa. My mind went to Camus and the rodents that spread the plague. Tuli smiled. I could be so naive sometimes. Shayele wasn't there to protect against the plague, against COVID, to protect against the cops who were busting Hasidic weddings, bar mitzvahs, and services which violated Belgian public health measures. But Tuli was a bit reticent to offer this as the authoritative explanation for Reb Shayele's presence. He was a Belzer, a Galician Hasidic dynasty, which he claimed was less swayed by fanciful flights of superstition. Our mutual friends, the one who initially introduced us, belonged to a Hungarian Hasidic dynasty, a Satmarer. He claimed that they really believed in this sort of magic. So our Hungarian Hasidic friend confirmed this explanation to me over Messenger, in a voice message, of course. The story is just something that Reb Shayele gave someone, a kamaya, a talisman, he said. With this pasuk, when he had like an inspection, the Kerestir, Reb Shayele, is the rebbe of the swindlers, of the people who do funny business, you know? Next slide. And this is a little bit of a content warning. I deal with questions of sexual violation and violence here. And then I looked at the verse written above his portrait, a biblical scene of sexual violation and violence, of unwanted entry into sacred homes and into bodies. A story ultimately about inhospitality had been invoked alongside his icon. The story of the Stomites, right, entering the house of Lot and the angels posed as strangers who blinded them was the charm that could protect Antwerp's Hasidim from the police from entering their sacred homes during COVID-19. So too, at reason, the cops would be blinded upon entry. This remarkably short response opened a new horizon of meaning. I had simply assumed until that moment that the talismanic image and accompanying verse were contemporary responses to the emergency at hand, to COVID-19. New situations demand new magic, the anthropologist E. Evans Pritchard famously noted in his 1937 Witchcraft, Oracles, and Magic Among the Azande. Not an unproblematic colonial work, and while this was a new situation, it was not new magic, I discovered. Next slide. As I soon discovered, this was very old magic connected to Shayele. This line was connected to mystical amulets. I have a reproduction here that Shayele would distribute during times of plagues, and this was made by a sofer, so I paid a precious price. Shayele did so much more than protect against mice. I would soon discover that I had stumbled upon a much larger phenomenon, a global Hasidic populist revival movement focused on Shayele, which has blossomed in the last decade, nearly an entire century after his death. Shayele's followers use his religious technologies, icons, amulets, and incantations across the Jewish diaspora. Next slide, please. You can find his icon at construction sites where his icon wards off mice, but also pesky building code inspectors. So in Yiddish it says on X, Reb Shayele is eingeschlafen. Did Reb Shayele fall asleep because it didn't work? They got a violation stop work order. Please, next slide. Or besides fire hydrants to ward off traffic enforcement agents.
Okay, so basically, when you're off 18 in McDonald's, a Range Rover geparkt by a pump. It's a bottom line, it says nicht the car registration, but it's do etwas anders. Whatever. The back von him, noch a Range Rover. There's a little picture, like seriously.
Okay, so this is from almost like a decade ago now. So this is a classic, or at least in my circles it is. And then in 2020, during the proceedings of a major international trial, the court case of the sexual predator Malka Leifer, you could spot his icon in the hand of the defendant's sister. Okay, and this is one of the few cases in which we see publicly a woman actually using Reb Shayele in the kind of public domain. It's mostly men from nearly every image I've seen. And through the course of fieldwork, as I mentioned previously, I've encountered other explanations for the rise of his popularity. Hasidic Jews today are disillusioned with living contemporary leadership, those whose power is legitimated only by their pedigree. They look rather to the past, summoning the charisma of a dead leader for intercession. And I think this is often an interesting dynamic where dead saints often kind of make claims upon the living. And there's an interesting kind of quite patterned element to this, actually, way beyond Judaism. Next slide, please. Okay, so this again, larger legitimation crisis, orphan, no pedigree, caring and hospitable in ways that the leaders of today are not, right? He's really indexing this larger legitimation crisis of Hasidic leadership in the Hasidic world today. Next slide, please. Others see it as in more critical terms as driven by an American-style version of Hasidism, particularly a kind of Satmar capitalist world that promotes a latter-day prosperity gospel, one that promises success, money, and ultimately gluttony, or in Yiddish, Freskheit. And even people will pejoratively refer to Shayele sometimes as the Fresser Rebbe, the Rebbe of Freskheit, of gluttony and indulgence. Throughout the year, Hasidic men will give an abundance to others, operating soup kitchens in his name. On his yahrzeit, however, they also deliver free food in abundance to the needy, but also sometimes in excess to themselves. Expensive and excessive amounts of red meat in particular are eaten in his honor to venerate the prosperity that he gives and will continue to give them. And this has raised alarm in quarters of the Hasidic world. One video even circulated on Twitter that compared these excessive feasts to a pig roast, suggesting that this form of gluttonous veneration was anything but kosher. A whole pig for the elevation of the soul of Reb Shayele, right? So it's pretty pointed.
To Zoom, they can see the video, but they can't hear.
Oh, okay. So this was a pig roast that was just being done to mock, again, the very unkosher gluttony that is performed in the name of Reb Shayele. And here you also have this VIP card. There's a whole VIP section of the pilgrimage site, which is about hospitality, but it is very casted. And then if you please go to the next one. And even from this year, this is a Hasidic Twitter, X, drag, Satmar, Mogo, Yomi Landau. This is from the most recent pilgrimage. So this is a very well-known billionaire, although unclear how much money he actually has. It's a larger question. Where it's the mini Kerestir package. He actually flew into Kerestir to this rural site in Hungary in a private jet. And so this is a mocking it again, Toyota High, mini Kerestir package where you get a mini jet, a helicopter, a Mercedes car to go to the pilgrimage site. So this is a larger, again, critique about the kind of excesses of capitalist and conspicuous consumption in the name of Reb Shayele. Okay, next slide, please. The last explanation, which I've actually really only heard once in one of my interviews, which I think is interesting, focuses on the pilgrimage itself, site itself. That is, anti-Zionist Hungarian Hasidim, unwilling to sacralize the land of Israel under the Zionist political regime, right? Satmar Hasidim will not pray at the Western Wall, seek to sacralize space elsewhere. And so actually it becomes a kind of spatial fix to go to one of the Kevrei Tzadikim, one of the in Europe, rather than have to deal with the question of the sacrality of space in the land of in Eretz Israel today, which is interesting and I think is a whole larger conversation. Okay, next slide, please. So now I want to move to a rather particular feature of this revival movement, in which Hasidic men in particular are actively speaking back to power. In their interactions with Copts, they're summoning Shayele's sovereign authority, which was inconceivable in the very miracle stories from which they drew their mystical inspiration. Next slide, please. On a New York State highway in 2022, a young Hasidic man recorded a dashcam video of him being pulled over by a state trooper. The following is a transcript of the video that I have translated. Okay. B'Shefer, God help me, please help me. When the state trooper returns, the young man rolls down his window. Instead of producing his license and registration, however, the young man pulls out an icon of Reb Shayele. In Yiddish, he says to the officer, Reb Shayele ben Reb Moshe gesucht oder sich weigern sich leiden. Reb Shayele, the son of Reb Moshe, said, either submit to my will, then to my authority, or die, leiden.
Shepherd, help me. Please, help me.
I don't know what that is.
Schreiber Moshe gesucht others zich lijken met de Biden.
I'm sorry?
Schreiber Moshe gesucht others zich lijken met de Biden.
What does that mean, sir?
Schreiber Moshe.
Okay.
Ik gesucht others zich lijken met de Biden.
Okay. I don't understand what you're trying to tell me.
De Schreiber Moshe gesucht others zich lijken met de Biden.
Okay. One more time?
De Shaya
Okay.
ben Reb Moshe al gesucht others zich lijken, others zich Biden.
Okay. What does that mean? I don't understand what you're saying.
De Schreiber Moshe gesucht others zich lijken, others zich Biden.
Okay, sit down with me.
Maar Shepherd, please. Maar Shepherd, please.
God, please. Okay, and then he comes back. The state trooper comes back. I'm just telling you the reason why I stopped you when you came around the corner. My radar said you were doing 70, okay? I'm not going to give you any tickets. You have no problems with your driver's license, so there's no reason to give you tickets for it, all right?
No problem with your driver's license.
Young man, okay, thank you. The state trooper, figure out what's going on with the license plates. Make sure they get put on, because having that on there, you can't have that on there. Young man, officer, I appreciate it. Thank you very much. After the trooper is no longer in earshot, the young man closes the car window and screams with glee to his friend Yankee over the phone, which is broadcast over the car speakers. He thanks him, which suggests that it was Yankee who recommended this approach. He confirms with Yankee that the state trooper let him off without a ticket. He attributes his success not to his identity as a white man, but rather to Shayele's intercession. While speaking Yiddish rather than in English may shield him from the consequences of mutual intelligibility, it is likely that the trooper's response would have been markedly more aggressive and less forgiving had this young man behaved similarly while inhabiting a different social identity, maybe, for example, a young black man. A series of related videos where this incantation is invoked have circulated across social media channels on Facebook, and interactions not only between American Hasidim and the police, but also between Israeli Hasidic men and airport officials, for example, where they're cursing at, if the baggage doesn't fit in the, bin, that, okay. It's also used in Meron against the Tzionim. That's a whole other story. And again, there's an interesting tension here because Reb Shayele said that it only worked on a goy, it only works on a non-Jew. And so I asked this to a chassid when I was doing fieldwork, and he said, "What's the question?" so there's some interesting ways he's becoming summoned. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, sorry, good slide. These videos achieved sufficient virality that Reb Shayele's guest house in Hungary even used to sell a Reb Shayele's license for purchase, and I bought one. I bought several of them online. They've now been discontinued. I'm sorry. They were actually a third of the price down. Coming from China, manufactured in China. In April 2023, while conducting fieldwork, I bought this license for $15 at a booth in one of the many tents serving free food to pilgrims. Created a month prior to the pilgrimage, the front of this fake New York State license, already expired, includes a reproduction of the amulet, the incantation, a printed photograph of Shayele with accolades and his signature circa 1930, and the icon of the guest house. The backside includes Tfilas Haderech, the Traveler's Prayer, a photograph of Shayele's gravestone, a reminder to give tzedakah and recite 3 chapters from Psalms, 23, 51, 101, and a QR code that allows buyers to purchase more licenses on Amazon.com. Once again, older mystical aphorisms associated with Shayele's personage are repurposed for the present moment. The first aphorism appears in a relatively short story about a Jewish tavern owner who is tormented by an anti-Semitic judge in the city. Shayele counsels him to give the judge a bribe. The town owner responds that he tried this method, but the judge refused his bribe. Shayele responds, "I have a practice transmitted through tradition that a non-Jew needs to take money, and if not, then he will receive an unnatural, violent death, a mesa meshuna." The second aphorism originates in a story about a Jewish tavern owner who was terrorized by a non-Jew from her city. When Reb Moshe Margaretin was drafted, next slide please, into the Hungarian army, his wife supported the family by running a small tavern. One of the local non-Jews frequented the establishment drinking heavily. Not only did he not pay his bills, but he would also cause damage and destruction to the furniture and building. Several times he threatened to kill the frightened woman and her children. In desperation, she traveled to Reb Shayele of Kerestir, telling him how she worked long, hard hours to feed her family, yet because of one person she wasn't able to continue. I have a tradition, Reb Shayele replied, that an evil person like this has either two choices, oder beigen oder liegen. Either he will bow, change his ways, or he will lie, lose his life. The woman returned home to find that the difficult client had suddenly become a decent, upright individual, paying his bills and treating her with respect. What is striking is that these aphorisms have in the wake of Shayele's revival, become incantations or curses. There's no evidence from the original materials that they were ever used as curses or incantations by Shayele or his followers directly to the face of their persecutors, right? The mice or other intermediaries did that work, right, where the declaration kind of changed this situation. Just as in the case of the mice at the beginning of today's presentation, Jews never actually directly confronted those who persecuted them. And certainly not those who were in positions of power, even within the subaltern imagination of these miracle stories, in which the natural order of things is temporarily suspended. It might appear at first blush that these everyday interactions with the police point to an emerging groundswell anti-police movement among Hasidic young men. And let me tell you otherwise. Next slide, please. Indeed, when initially sharing these images and videos with friends and colleagues, they almost immediately draw comparisons with the anti-government sovereign citizens movement. Founded as a racist and anti-Semitic organization in 1971, sovereigns believe that the American government, quote, set up by the founding fathers under a common law legal system was secretly replaced. They think the replacement government swapped common law for admiralty law, which is a law of the sea and international commerce. There is no central leadership for the movement. However, a rotating group of nationwide figures and local leaders with individualized views on sovereign citizen ideology and techniques. Their recommendations often include tax evasion, adverse possession, squatting on a property that does not belong to them, or ignoring laws regarding driver's licenses, vehicle registration, or license plates possession, end quote. Next slide. But this comparison to the sovereign citizens movement proves to be a rather facile comparison. On April 21st, 2021, a Ramapo County, New York, non-Jewish police officer named Julian Franklin pulled over a Hasidic man for speeding. In a staged reenactment of the traffic stop posted as an Instagram video on Jewish Breaking News, we hear the police officer explaining to the man. While facing the camera, she explains that she will not issue him a speeding ticket out of professional courtesy. We learn that the driver neither serves as a fellow police officer nor lives in the United States, however. He is a volunteer from the Montreal chapter of Hatzalah, the Transnational Jewish Emergency Medical Services. Officer Franklin issues him a formal warning to slow down while driving in Muncie and wishes him a safe return trip to Montreal. In response, the volunteer officer thanks the police officer profusely. "Thank you so much, you're kind. I wish the police officers in Montreal would be like you." Yet before leaving the scene, Officer Franklin does something rather unexpected. She invokes the name of Reb Shayele. "Reb Shayele ben Reb Moshe," she says, eliciting boisterous laughter from the Hasidic men in the car, one of whom screams, "There you go," and we can watch it right now.
I'm not going to give you a ticket right now because I'm going to give you the courtesy of being a member of Hatzalah in Quebec, and I ask that you slow down here in Muncie and you have a safe trip back home.
Thank you so much. You're kind. I wish the police officers in Montreal would be like you.
Reb Shayele ben Reb Moshe.
There you go. There you go. Okay, bye.
The scene parodically unveils the open secret upon which Reb Shayele's charms would appeal to rely, namely that the police cannot understand the magical incantations directed against them. Officer Franklin not only knows its meaning, she legitimates its authority. This might reveal the operation of a plural sovereign cosmopolitical order, a mutual recognition between the cop and the Hatzalah member, which recognizes Hasidic authorities, its cooperation with the state through its own auxiliary policing and emergency medical services, and the autonomous, however, provisional powers afforded to Hasidic communities to often police their own communities, which are decidedly not afforded to black folks and communities of color. The police are there to police other people. This is the racist logic of the thin blue line, right? So what lessons does this movement offer to the left? And I think there are many. Next slide, please. Okay, by the way, I have all types of goodies here. Here's a Reb Shayele icon. Here's a book if you want to see. And I also just want to show you this before I forget. This is something I borrowed from the pilgrimage site that is an anti-smartphone sign. So if you bring out one of the unholy kalim, if you bring out a smartphone, your tefillas and for parnasa and other things are not going to get into Reb Shayele. And here he is in perfect AI form, overseeing his grave. Okay, just wanted to show you. Okay. I must admit that I found myself drawn to Shayele's powers. I regularly keep his amulet in my luggage when I travel, his icon on my keychain. I've collected nearly every source of imaginable memorabilia with Shayele's portrait, including even a strobe LED nightlight. But as I mentioned above, Shayele is a rather reactionary figure. He legitimizes the very institutions and authorities he would appear to challenge. His miracles do not really fundamentally challenge systems of injustice. They simply temporarily suspend the natural order of things. And so I think one lesson for the left, the Jewish left included, is not to fall prey to the kind of reactionary politics of miracles. And I'm not suggesting here one way or the other that miracles don't happen. I'm just saying that they're maybe not good for politics. Miracles are like transgressions in that they rarely challenge unjust systems and institutions. Indeed, they frequently reaffirm their legitimacy. Stated otherwise, miracles are governed by a logic of exceptionality, right? They're meant to bend the laws of nature. They're meant to be an exception to the rule, and so in so doing, they often reaffirm it. My next and last point relates to the issue of cynical reason with which I began the presentation, and I would say this is the part that's the most information, and I would really love your feedback. I have not presented this material before. As I mentioned several times before, many of Shayele's devotees often openly venerate him as a rebbe of Gashmius. For several of you in the audience, this will likely surprise you, and indeed it surprised me early on during fieldwork. That is, Gashmius, earthly, carnal, material pleasures, are frequently meant to be sublimated towards spiritual ends, ruchnius, right? There's avodah b'gashmius, but it's supposed to be, again, towards some type of higher spiritual power or end. Shayele's critics, as I had mentioned before, critique his revival movement for this very reason, that he provides a license to engage in indulgence, conspicuous consumption, etc. And this is what's so fascinating. Shayele's devotees don't actually refute this. They're very much aware, in fact, of what they are doing. They are not, in the traditional Marxian sense, victims of false consciousness, blissfully unaware of what they're doing. They haven't been duped. Indeed, they are all too aware that what they are doing, they're doing and acting anyway. Their cynical reason is rooted in a very particular messianic populist understanding of the age we inhabit. Through several interviews at the pilgrimage site in the last few years, several Hasidic men have shared with me that we are living in the footsteps of the Messianic age. A period of spiritual destitution, social breakdown, a crisis of legitimation, etc. And so Shayele's reappearance on the scene of history is a manifestation of this spiritual destitution. Rather than resisting it, they embrace his prosperity gospel of crass materialism. They resign themselves to it. In many respects, the pre-Messianic time of Ikvesa de Mashiach that Shayele's devotees believe we inhabit kind of uncannily reflects Gramsci's famous quotation about the interregnum. Quote, "The crisis consists precisely in the fact that the old is dying and the new cannot be reborn. In this interregnum, a great variety of morbid symptoms appear." How do we acknowledge and respond to these morbid symptoms, however? It strikes me that much of contemporary critical theory is a rejoinder to this question, how we cope with or not cope with this reality. Do we resign ourselves to the world as it is because we can imagine no alternative to it? a la capitalist realism, or embrace that which is an impediment to our own flourishing, a la, Berlantian cruel optimism. Some of Shayele's devotees respond to this interregnum with the type of cynical reason we find in Slitterdag and Zizek. If the unheimlich for Freud, and I apologize for my very Yiddishized pronunciation of the German, for Freud is not the unfamiliar, but rather the all too familiar, then enlightened false consciousness is one in which we are all too aware of what we are doing and yet we do it anyway. Shayele's devotees are seemingly impervious to critique. Nothing can be unmasked because there are no pretenses when they unabashedly embrace Gashmias. They're not claiming it's for some higher spiritual end. And to be clear, their messianism is not antinomian in any fashion. They're not accelerationists who are breaking Jewish law or breaking with it by engaging in redemption through transgression. But I also should note that this focus on materialism cuts in multiple directions. And here, chesed keeps reappearing in several of my interviews and in my research. It appears prominently in what we might call their messianic economic theology. It's decidedly not a watered-down concept or empty signifier like tikkun olam. It's very much animated by a kind of cynical reason. In this period of spiritual degradation, as they understand it, God provides with a rather paternalistic sense of generosity that which we don't deserve. Chesed is an unearned gift, which I think would sound familiar to many in the audience, right? Chesed and Gvura. Next slide, please. Okay. Shayele facilitates these miracles and wonders, advocating for and interceding on behalf of those who beseech him. Shayele is often rendered as a maternal figure to the Jewish people because of association with domesticity and social reproduction. Next one.
I think that's the last one.
Oh, maybe the one before. I'm sorry. Yeah. So Reb Shayele became a mother of the Jewish people, and in fact, infant formula is delivered in his name. So I think it's not so subtle. He's a kind of, Tevye, they're Melchiker in that way, right? He's a feminist. Okay. A lot going on there. Slide 20. Okay. Chesed is its own circular economy. It's distributed from above and distributed horizontally in the earthly plane. If you are bestowed prosperity, you are enjoined to redistribute in Shayele's honor, to receive yet more blessings, wonders, and miracles from above. Shayele is the patron saint of hospitality, after all. Massive amounts of food are donated across the Hasidic and non-Hasidic world in his name, through year-round soup kitchens and food drives bearing his name. Chesed is neither altruistic, but nor is it wholly egoistic, and once again, there's a deeply messianic element to it. Chesed is a prophylactic. But by performing it in Shayele's name, one can stave off the worst birth pains of the messianic era. So I'm still trying to formulate in conclusion what we can learn on the left from Shayele's followers who openly embrace materialism. On the one hand, there's something rather disarming about this structure. There's nothing self-righteous or sanctimonious about openly embracing materialism, of abandoning the pretense that you're constantly sublimating it towards some higher spiritual end. And maybe this is a particular element of Shayele's messianic populism that could be productive for the Jewish left and the left more broadly. Just to kind of embrace a kind of just, crude materialism and say, like, this is what we're about. It's not towards some loftier goal, like, just give us the goods and redistribute them equally and so on, right? It's not towards, it's, material but not spiritual, to play on spiritual but not religious. I see Shayele's revival over the past decade as a response to a much broader crisis of care in capitalist society. Shayele is reappearing as the patron saint of hospitality because of the perceived inhospitality of the world we inhabit. That includes a rather pointed populist critique of dynastic elites within the Hasidic world and protection of enemies from without the Hasidic world that threaten life and livelihood. But as often occurs in politics, the system manages to incorporate the critique that challenges it. Rabbinic dynastic elites celebrate Shayele, visit his gravesite, bring their own Hasidim to it, give speeches that venerate him. Lo and behold, as with the case with the police, what appears to be a potentially radical populist movement, one which challenges authority, turns out to be remarkably conservative and reactionary, one that only preserves and fortifies the very institutions it appears to challenge. Sounds familiar. It's a bug. It's not a bug, but rather a feature. Shayele is no maverick or stranger king who suspended the order of things. His legitimacy in his own lifetime and that of today had to be legitimized by dynastic elite rebels. And this strikes me as a remarkably relevant point for our movements today as we create an actually existing populist left alternative. Thank you. Hard to conduct. So I know we're, okay, yeah. Yeah, please. Questions, critiques, rotten tomatoes.
So you showed us examples of invoking Reb Shayele for secular authorities, and like kind of for we didn't see, you know, an Austin going to the mayor of New York City or governor of New York. We saw like cop interactions. So it's like, you know, mid-level bureaucrats.
Yeah.
So my question is, number one, would you see a Hasid invoking that towards Jewish mid-level authorities? I'm imagining, you know, your daughter gets kicked out of Beis Yaakov for some CS infraction. Like, could you or your daughter invoke Shayele's name to, like, you know, get her back in school? No.
No. It's a really good question. I mean, one of the exceptions is, like, actually the CIN of the police in Meron, right, which is, but it's really like, it really is, in every single case I can think of, and I've spoken now to, I don't know, well over, I think so many interviews and conversations. It really is almost to a T non-Jewish authorities. You know, again, building code inspectors, auditors of you know, Hasidic schools that are not on the books. You know, there's an interesting story of a school auditor who comes into a British Haredi school, and she sleeps on the floor because it's slippery in the kitchen, and that could have led itself right to some horrible thing. And she comes to, and she's okay, and she actually sees an icon of Reb Shayele, and the school is saved, and they're not, they don't get in trouble. So there's all of these. Again, it's like quite patterns, but it is really almost, again, to a T to non-Jewish authorities.
So personally, in my own life, I wasn't familiar with all the implications. I'm only familiar with stories of people, like not saying it specifically to the cop, but like, you know, Rashad, just his name under their breath. So it's interesting to hear that there's, you know, the further version. The thing is a lot of videos you showed are specifically, I'd say, halfway between, you know, classic Meir Balanes stories. You know, you lose something, like on the other hand, you know, decades-long industry of like PDA cards and literally buying off the cops, which is a massive thing. So instead of handing the cop a PDA card, which means you've paid him already, that's what a PDA card is. That's how police benevolent associations work, if everyone didn't know that. You're just handing him a Meir Balanes picture, but like, you know, and it's that halfway in between is something that's very interesting to me, because it's not coming out of nowhere. It's little pieces of society that existed already.
Absolutely, that's a great point. And in fact, there is an image I've seen with the PBA, like actual card where Shayele's icon has actually been superimposed on it. So so it gets, so there is this existing, I mean, and I think what's so wild about it, I didn't go into it at all today because it's a completely separate talk, but like, the question of what are the kind of felicity conditions, you know, in the kind of Austinian sense in which like it works or doesn't work. Do you have to believe in it for it to work? Does the authority have to be actually in the wrong to be an overzealous anti-Semite for it to actually work? It seems actually, for the most part, that it actually works regardless of one's intentions or the conditions, which is also really interesting, right? It's like not about, you know, again, this is like a larger kind of anthropological critique. It's not about some type of like Protestant interior sincerity, right? It's just like, you do the formula and it works, right? Whether it's right or wrong is another question, but it's gonna work. And I think that's also one of the interesting elements here that really pushes up against a kind of Protestant rendering of religious life. Yeah.
Did you know one more question about it? Is that they, specifically recently, I've seen a bunch of commentaries of Rabbanim being very upset about, overindulgent payamelas, or, I've seen specifically one that calls out charcuterie boards for anarchy. So the whole, this level of Gashmi is inherently antinomian. So there are Rabbanim who would be, I don't know if they specifically called out, a Suda, the Reb Shayele as part of this, but it does seem like there is some pushback on Gashmias.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, yes. Oh, and that's the whole point of the, so yes, I think that there are certainly rebbes who are kind of promoting a particular version of Shayele, and then there are others who are also pushing back, but often trying to recuperate. It's, Reb Shayele is about hospitality, right? And my whole argument is that, they're part of this, there is something built into the structure of Shayele's material, what Benny Brown calls material tzadikism, that is always already excessive, and saints always are excessive. There's nothing, it's not like it's again, not a bug, it's a feature. And so that's, in some ways, to foundationally misrecognize what saints are and what they do. And I think it's also, there's something ritualized about it, where it's generously not just about as a license for indulgence, but there's also a way in which one is thanking Reb Shayele through the act of eating, and so it becomes ritualized, and then beseeching him for more. So there's something happening here that's more complex, I think, than just the language of the embourgeoisement of Haredi life. That would be my pushback a little bit. Maybe I'm a bit too charitable, but yeah. Maybe over here, we need something new? Yeah.
Probably a very silly or inconsequential question, but I saw on the Reb Shayele driver's license that there was an expiration date on it.
Yeah.
Do you know why that was?
Oh, that's a great question. I think it's just meant to mimic the driver's license itself, right? But of course, the great part of it is it already came expired, which is so perfect. But yeah, it's meant to, again, mimic what a driver's license should look like. So
I think it was probably that, not.
Yeah, no.
There's a chance it was you need to renew it to you.
Oh, no, that's great though. But no, yeah, they actually I think this is a kind of format that they it's I think there's other versions of this, that this is just one where Shayele has been superimposed onto the fake driver's license genre.
I was curious, in two directions. So, one end was with your kind of provocation around the left, is it pothole politics precursor?
I'm sorry?
Is it a pre-pothole politics kind of idea, the kind of very direct interaction on it? And the other end was actually about gender, especially with the end segment you had, kind of the maternal quality, the kind of interceding. The early example, a lot of it was interacting with women, right? That first fable. Or am I misremembering?
So some of them are with women, some of them are with men. Yeah.
But just there seems to be a gender thing about providing.
Yeah. That one I can answer first, I think. So Shayele, again, there's a great quote from it's in a great volume from the 90s called Marjorie Garber's book, and then there's a section on religious drag where there's a quote from earlier, maybe not a historian, so 18th, 17th century volume, which says that there are three genders: men, women, and clergy. And there is something about, there is something here about Shayele does, so literally there's a very famous quote where there's a play on Yakub Orphaned, where they say I always invert the order, but there's the Rav Ravaya, there's the Za'araya, there's the Tafla, and then there's Unashaya. So it gets retranslated in the way that, but Mordechai was the one who said this. There's the great Rebbes, the big Rebbes. There's the smaller Rebbes. Then there's even like the shtickle Rebbes, the really little Rebbes. And then there's Shaya, right? And the women folk, Shaya in Yiddish, and Shaya, all in a category to themselves, to himself, herself. And Rabbi Moshe Weinberger, who's this kind of, again, neo-Hasidic figure, was involved with Bayu, blah, 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 right, has this whole thing where he goes very explicitly into this and says, yeah, Reb Shayele is a motherly figure. And to me, right, it is dealing with the structure of, I think, domesticity and hospitality and social reproduction, right, that he is providing for, which is often rendered as a feminized domain, and in a way that I think is troubled by many of the kind of Boyarin-esque contradictions in which men supersede or become the feminized right, where it actually then asks the question like, okay, so actually what is all the labor that's going on in the background that is the condition for Reb Shayele then to be rendered as the, what is the hidden abode behind the hidden abode behind the hidden abode, so to speak, of capital. So there's all of these really, and he's also a kind of queer figure in the way that saintly figures are too. There's a famous story where Reb Shayele, his future brother-in-law says, I'm so sorry, I can't pay for I keep having to delay your wedding because I can't afford it. And Reb Shayele, to be nice to him, says, if it was actually up to me, I'd never get married, right? So again, is this a sign of the saintly, lack of carnality he provides for the bodies of others? Or is this a sign of saintly, kind of self-abnegation, humility? Or is there something a little queer about Shayele that is not of the flesh in that way, or has some other, ace qualities? So yeah, I'm sorry, I think we're over time.
Yeah, we're about time.
Oh, I'm sorry, about time? Okay. Thank you so much. And I'm sorry I didn't answer your comment.